Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
What was your childhood monster? I'm pretty sure everyone has one. That monster that came from your own imagination. The one that still kinda creeps you out today, even though you know it's bullshit. Mine first came into my head when I was around 10 years old. My mother had just had twins, and I gave up my old room to them, and we remodeled the attic above our garage so I could live in it instead. The attic was kind of out of the way as far as the layout of the house goes and not connected to the other top floor we had. So part of the remodeling involved putting in a bathroom with a shower into my room. On the wall that the bathroom bordered the stairs going up into my room, they installed a little window almost at the ceiling, meant to give in some natural light. But because of the angle of the windows on the stairs and the floodlight we had on the back deck, there would always be this huge pane of light on the ceiling at night. Now, because it used to be an attic, the room sits right below the roof and all the walls slope inwards. On one of the first nights I spent in there, something in the wall above my bed started scratching and slithering. It was probably just a rat, frantically moving above the area my bed was. I freaked out and ran into the bathroom, locked the door, and sat myself in a corner. I couldn't hear if the scratching was still going or not, so after a while I decided to get up and go back to bed. But when I started to stand up, I for some reason looked up to the ceiling of the bathroom. This is the part that still weirds me out a little bit. There was a huge shadow in the middle of the pane of light. On each side of it there looked to be smaller sets of ridges like fingers or something. Like something was hoisting themselves up to look in the window. Because of where I was hiding, I couldn't see the window, but I knew there couldn't actually be anybody there. The window was easily 10 feet above the stairs. That being said, I slept in the bathroom that night. I never saw that shadow again, so I've pretty much convinced myself I imagined it at this point. That and the scratching sounds never came back. Still though, all through my childhood I always had this nerve-wracking fear that some spindly 10-foot-tall shadow would come beat me up at night. I'm pretty sure it contributed to some of my night terrors. It made me stress, so I'd always see its shadow in nightmares and shit.
After watching that Courage the Cowardly Dog episode about the guy who lived inside of the vacuum cleaner and only breathed in dust, I mentally concocted this weird nightmarish being that haunted my dreams from time to time. He didn't even look like the character from the show, but I am pretty sure he was based off of him. The being was of average height, but was very thin, and walked very slouched over. He had brown skin that was very leathery and wrinkled, but it wasn't at all droopy. It was as if his skin was tightly bound to his long, narrow head. His eyes were hollow sockets that leaked dust or sand. His mouth would do the same when it was open. However, his mouth wasn't gaping and excessively large. It was about the same size as an average person's mouth. The scary part about it was how small it was when closed. It looked almost non-existent. He wore blackish-brown tattered rags, almost like gauze, that hung off of his body. In the handful of nightmares that he was in, he stood in the doorway and just looked in at me. He'd slowly make his way over to my bed and just stare, with dust pouring into the floor from his eyes and mouth. He never said anything, but it was strange how the dreams never really had any progression in the dreams, and I just had to watch him in fear until the dust formed a large mound beside my bed.
Memory from when I was a kid. I never remembered the full thing. It always comes to me in fragments. But here is what I can piece together. I was always a frail kid. I was born with pneumonia, and until I was 7 I was uber frail and would fall sick all the time. I would go to the hospital every week for one reason or another. On one occasion I had a fever that had been going on for a few days, and my mom decided to take me to the hospital. The doctor decided to put me under observation for a day to see how I would react to the meds. Anyway, while I was there, this very beautiful-looking nurse kept attending to me. She was about 23, a redhead with green eyes, very beautiful. She brought me food while other nurses brought me meds. She was never in the room at the same time as my mom, the doctor, or the other nurses. And even though she was beautiful, the food she brought me was horrible. I chalked it up as it being hospital food, though, and kept eating, even though it made my stomach ill. Fast forward a couple of hours, the doctor says I'll stay another day, not because of the fever, but because my stomach is killing me, and he thinks it's a reaction to the medicine. At about midnight, my mom decided to go home for an hour to shower and get new clothes and come back. The hospital was deserted by them. My mom had not left for 5 minutes when the beautiful nurse came in and asked me if everything was all right. I tell her my stomach hurts. She then picks me by the hand and tells me we will get some medicine. She walks me to the elevator and we ride it to some floor down, way down, below the garage. It's dark and I get a weird feel from there. We keep on walking. At this point, I don't remember what happened, except that she produced a ring of keys and opened a door that led down a dark stairway. We went down it, and at the bottom she opened another set of old metal doors. Inside, it's pretty dark, but I can see it's a deposit of some kind. Old file cabinets are stacked everywhere, gurneys, chairs, and wheelchairs. There is dust covering everything, and I get the feel I wasn't supposed to be in there. The nurse walks into the room and says, "Come on," but doesn't look behind and keeps going out of my sight. I stop at the threshold of the door. I know I'm not supposed to be there. I'm not scared, but I know I'm not supposed to go in. She calls "come on" from somewhere, still close. I back out of there and up the stairway. This is another part I don't remember much, but I end up making my way back to the elevator doors. I sat there with my head between my knees for a long time, all the while feeling like someone was watching me, never daring to look up. I don't know how long it passed, but eventually this janitor came down the elevator. Needless to say, he jumps when he sees me and asks me how I got down there. I don't answer, just say I want to leave. He picked me up and set me down inside the elevator. As he was pushing the button to the main floor, he turned around to look at the corridor. He jumped and tensed, then the doors closed. I looked at him and his face had gone white, but he didn't say anything. He brought me back to the main floor and handed me to a doctor, then called a few other janitors who were nearby, and they both rode down the elevator. He looked concerned. I left the next day and kept dreaming about it ever since.
There were 2 different entities that bugged me a lot when I was younger. Keep in mind, I had some vivid hallucinations and delirious fits when I was younger, but I was only ever terrified of these 2 things. I was roughly 6 to 9 years old when this all took place. The first were the 2 ghosts living under my dresser. They would peek out and watch me. All they did was stare at me. Whenever I would go to get clothing from my dresser, they would discuss what they wanted to do to me, but it was so quiet that I could not hear the details. They were especially adamant when I had just gotten out of the shower. The other was a recurring dream I had. In the dream, I was sitting in a chair in my closet, staring at a single clothing hanger. The hanger began to tremble, and I knew I had angered the ghost. I quickly got out of the closet and ran to my bedroom door only to find it locked. 2 of my favorite stuffed animals were possessed and were closing in on me. I yelled to my parents to help me, but no one ever heard. I always woke up before the stuffed toys got to me. With my mother being an avid believer in ghosts and constantly telling me that my room, especially the closet, was full of negative energy, it was a pretty spooky place to be.
This brings back some of my first disturbing memories. I lived in a haunted house most of my childhood. It was used by the Germans during the occupation. I live in Norway, and one of the officers walked the stairs at night along with some general poltergeist stuff like falling pictures. Be 3 years old, sitting in my bed waiting for my father to come read for me, like he always does. After waiting for some time, I try to call out to him, but it feels like my voice cannot leave the room. Something slides out of the wall just at the corner of my eye. It is sliding like it is flat as paper and moves out of the cracks. I still remember the creature to this day. It is jet black, with 2 small glowing eyes. It is shaped like a panther, but much bigger and standing hunched at the base of my bed. It speaks in a raspy, mechanical voice. You. Stupid. While moving its claw up at me, I cover my eyes with my hands and just sit there the entire night waiting for the sun to come up, or for it to get me. At 3 years old, I started contemplating my own death and mortality. I finally mustered up the courage to yell for my dad to chase the monster away. When he arrives, the creature is of course gone, and sunlight is cutting through the curtains, aiming at exactly where it was standing. I am scared of being alone in the house ever since. Pick is of my house. I have some more stories if you guys are interested. I lived in rural Ireland as a child. It was an isolated area, very religious and old-fashioned. It was probably the last place in the country to see priests as figureheads and power players in a community. There were always stories of abuse involving powerful politicians, etc. The sort of stuff parents would tell you to not be silly about, but at the same time would share knowing looks over. One day at night, I was on my own in the house. The power line goes out. It is not too strange in the country, but still spooky by myself. No mobile phone.jpg. The house is surrounded by forest on one side and a field on the other. The field leads onto the main road. I notice car lights on the road. I am instantly paranoid because no one should be coming down there late at night, and isolated country houses are seriously vulnerable to robberies, etc. A sort of standoff ensues. I can clearly make out where the car parked and saw people getting out. It is not a car, actually, it is a white van. I am suspicious that it is travelers. Travelers are like Irish gypsies. They used to travel around doing odd jobs for people, but have become an inbred gang of criminals that the state supports because of liberalism. I am wary of letting the dog out because it is not a natural guard dog and I do not want them to kill it. Plus, it is better in the house. It basically becomes me paranoid, in the house looking out windows with my father's shotgun. I was totally ready to kill in that moment. Primal.jpg. Eventually, they start to come through the forest. I start shouting at them, telling them I have got a gun, etc. It was probably the scariest moment of my life. They are very angry at this because they essentially believe it is their right to commit crimes. One comes close and I shoot to kill. By close, I mean he leaves the tree line about 20 yards from the house. I was not a good shot then, but I clipped him around the face area. It was a buckshot, so it would not be fatal at that range, but still a face shot is a face shot. It was horrifying like this. The dog is going mad. I threatened to release him, saying I have like 5 Dobermans or some shit. Eventually, they fucked off, sensing I wasn't the trouble. The power line's still not on in the morning, so I trekked out to town to the police station. Tell them what happened. Can basically identify the people. They do fuck all. Not surprising here. The police are often scared of criminals here due to having no legal protection or firearms, etc. In a small town, they usually just turn a blind eye to avoid trouble. Parents shocked and appalled at how police do not give a fuck. Start pressuring the town council, etc. We were met with a blank wall. Actually leave town over it because we keep getting followed by travelers. One of them had scars across his forehead, so he was probably the dude that got shot. Years pass. A frightening and violent memory it remains. During the exposing of the abuse a few years ago, it turns out that the town I was from had massive amounts of abuse. Several key figures in the church who were on the town council and had ties with the guards were involved. Tales of travelers being used to commit crimes for money, etc., on their behalf. In return for blind eyes being turned to crimes, etc., come out. Tiger kidnappings and robberies were part of it. The power line that went down around my house was actually probably turned off by the town council, my family surmised. The fields when almost robbed and killed by a group of gypsies on behalf of a corrupt town, trying to fund its abuse. True detective ain't got shit.
Nobody believes this shit, but /x/ seems pretty receptive. The story is completely how I remember it. My family used to live in a huge log A-frame style house when I was 7 to about 10. It was a really sweet house with about a 90-acre wooded lot. I don't know the exact square footage, but the house was enormous, especially to a kid who had never known anything but 2-bedroom apartments. After we had lived there for about a year, my mom and sister went out of town to visit my grandparents, and my father and I were in the house alone. At about midnight on the first night they were gone, my dad woke me up and we went into town to spend the night in a hotel. As an adult, he told me that he just had an extremely uneasy feeling that night, like being watched, but attributed it to being surrounded by forest in a relatively unfamiliar house. My younger sister was only like 2 years old when we first moved in, but as she got older, some really weird shit started happening around the house. Lights would turn on and off on their own. Pictures would fall off the walls, the usual. None of us thought it was a huge deal, except for my sister, who told us that Stan was doing these things. She described Stan as an old man with white hair and ripped up clothes. She would talk to Stan all the time. I thought it was just an imaginary friend, but in hindsight, the conversations they would have were really bizarre. "I'm not supposed to go outside when it's dark, Stan. I don't care if it makes you sad." Almost always after these conversations, some shit would fall off the wall, and she would start crying. It was starting to get spooky. It wasn't always hostile, though. My sister would tell us that Stan pushes her on the swing outside, and I must say that I watched this 4-year-old kid get pretty high on that goddamn swing, with seemingly no effort. In the months before we moved out, shit got really intense with this Stan character. She would explain to us that she didn't want to play with him anymore because he was always trying to get her in trouble. He only wanted to play with matches and didn't want to push her on the swing anymore. Fire was definitely a recurring theme with Stan. Very shortly before we moved out, we were just sitting around watching TV with a fire burning in the fireplace. The house had an old wood-burning fireplace. It was pretty cool. Anyway, out of nowhere, a burning log just flies through the glass and out onto the floor. I remember to this day seeing that log sitting there like 10 feet away from the fireplace, just burning the hell out of the carpet. My dad managed to get it back in the fireplace before it did any damage, but it was really weird the way my sister just kept apologizing. Not to us, but to Stan. After this, there were really no big incidents, and we moved out a couple months later. Much later, when I was around 15 or 16, we met another local family who used to live in the house. They asked us if any weird shit ever happened, and their stories were pretty consistent with ours, minus an actual entity. They had the same type of things, stuff falling off walls and shelves, TV turning on at night, but it all culminated in a fire upstairs. They told us that they had to have the whole upper level of the house remodeled because of a fire that started up there. Apparently, the official cause was a candle that was burning on an end table in the loft upstairs, setting the curtains on fire. The only problem is that the window was closed and there was plenty of distance between the candle and curtains, so how could they have come in contact? Not spooky, I know, but it's the only real shit I've ever experienced. On a side note, the house was demolished maybe 5 years after we moved out. My sister lives a normal life, but remembers Stan in vivid detail, though never saw him after we left the house. The end. Thanks/X/.
Be 7 or 8. Live across the street from best friends. Around 9 or 10 p.m. before bed, we would walkie-talkie each other, usually with binoculars, making dumb faces, etc. One weekend night, we stayed up late talking to each other. His parents go out on a date night. Around 11 p.m., we are still up making faces and laughing. See something out of the corner of my eye through the binoculars. Looks like a person going behind his house. See, his parents' car is not there in case I missed it getting back or something. Dude, I think someone is in your backyard. All the lights were out, but I could make out his face dropping and panicking. Hear glass break through his end of the walkie-talkie. He leaves his walkie-talkie on as he goes to the tiny covered crawl space in his closet. It has a little hole you pull open, and it is big enough for a kid to hide in. He used it in hide and seek, and I could never find him. Hear and see his door slam open and the light flash on. See a man in all black throwing sheets and toys and shit all around the room. See him open the closet and throw clothes looking for my hiding friend. Hear my friend's labored breathing on the walkie. After about 1 minute or so, the man starts yelling and screaming. The parents start pulling into the driveway, and the guy bolts it. About 2 weeks later, a man was arrested trying to kidnap someone at the park down the street from our house. The guy must have seen my friend and me and followed us home and waited for one of our parents to not be there one night.
My dad had a cottage, and in the summer of 1998, I was 18. I played competitive baseball, and one Friday night I finished a game at 9:30, went home to shower, and then started to drive up to the cottage, which would take about 3 hours. I left the city at about 11 and picked up some McDonald's along the highway. About 2 hours in, the route turns into a one-lane highway, and it is past 1 o'clock. I'm playing my music and feeling pretty good. In the distance, I see a car driving towards me. It must have seen me as well, and he starts flashing his high beams, which I thought was really annoying. I slowed down a bit, not sure what his intentions were, and as he approached, I realized his horn was blaring, and he was speeding like crazy. Before I knew it, he drove past me and kept on going. I was a bit panicked, but figured it was just some idiot, so I tried to put it out of my head. About 5 minutes later, I was still driving when something flew over my car. Honestly, it looked like a white plastic bag and seemed maybe 10 feet above the car. By the time I saw it, it was almost over me, but it seemed like it flew in the opposite direction or was stationary as I drove under it. But the really freaky thing was that it illuminated the entire inside of my car and the road. I looked back in all my mirrors but did not see anything. So it is well past 1 a.m. I am tired, scared, but on the final stretch to the cottage, so I figured I would keep going. I arrived, started unpacking in a bedroom when I looked out the window towards the road. Now this cottage is in the middle of nowhere. It is on a road that ends. I am all alone. I looked out the window, and there was a car with its lights on driving very slowly up the street towards my driveway. I can see it through the trees. I turn off all the lights and I watch. It goes past my driveway and stops. I am listening to hear if the doors open or anything, but I do not hear anything but some muffled radio. It backs up a bit past my driveway and then drives forward. It turns into my driveway and I figure it is on. I have baseball bats all over the place, so I walk back through the cottage and grab a bat. All the lights are off. I find my keys and walk out the door and lock it behind me. Outside it is completely dark, so I'm hidden in the darkness and I just watch as this car rolls very slowly down the driveway. Then it stops. It idles for maybe 10 seconds before reversing and driving away. I stayed long enough to make some coffee and drive home.
This is legit true, happened to me between the ages of 8 and 10 years old. We moved to this crummy rent house when I was younger. It wasn't a bad home per se, but I could always feel something was off. The living room used to be a garage. The old living room was now a dining room that connected to the kitchen. The kitchen was small and that led to a sort of open den. This would be my room soon at the moment, as me and my middle brother shared a room. From the den, a long hallway that led to a bathroom, 2 rooms in the master bedroom, and had another small, narrow hallway that led back to the dining room. I didn't mind sharing a bedroom with my brother. To this day, I don't even know why I wanted my own room, but for some reason I wanted to make that den my room. My oldest brother had the best of the 2 other rooms, so I had no choice but the den. I begged my parents for days, even perhaps weeks. Eventually they caved. I made a big mistake. The den was the biggest room in the house other than the living room, and I was convinced I would have the coolest room amongst my brothers. There was a problem, though. The den only had 3 walls, so I could see into the kitchen and pathway that is a part of the hall. Never did I have issues sharing a room with my brother, but it seems that as soon as I was alone, I set myself up for attack. I began having a crippling fear every night. It was a type of fear that suffocates, makes your blood boil, and skin tingle. I don't know what I was afraid of. It was an animalistic type of fear, like my instincts were telling me you shouldn't be here. I was obsessed with Toy Story at the time, so whenever the fear came about, I would keep replaying the movie over and over again in my mind until I passed out. I always made sure my blanket obstructed my view of the kitchen as well, another instinct for some reason. After about a month has passed, things began to get really fucked up in my new room, if you could consider it a room. It was just a makeshift room, really, and my oldest bro would always say, "Dude, I don't even know why you wanted that room." Anyways, every time the fear would return, I would have the strongest urge to go to my parents' room, furthest room in the house. Courage was not easy to build up with this type of fear, but when I felt strong enough, I rushed to my parents' room so fast I could feel the wind in my ears. I made sure to always keep an eye behind me as I ran. This was another response I felt I was doing out of instinct. I mean, it's not like I even saw anything. It was only the fear, right? Well, it seems my ventures into my parents' room every night began a new terror. It seems that stepping over the threshold into my parents' room began a cycle of horrifying dreams that would occur every time I went into my parents' room. It was the exact same dream every time, too. A very simple nightmare, really. The nightmare involved me running to my parents' room looking over my shoulder. That is when the darkness appeared, a dark, cloaked figure, a complete silhouette of pure fear. It was the fear I felt but could not see. I was always running like I was running through sludge fighting to get away from the dark man, but the dream always ended the same. I would always make it to my parents' room and he would stand by the threshold watching me. On a tangent, one time I had a dream. I was in my oldest brother's closet and found a small dark figure that grabbed me. This dream only ever happened once. Things really started getting weird the more this dream cycle continued. These dreams were so similar to my circumstances in real life that frankly to this day, I cannot remember what was a dream and what was real. I have memories of playing this game during the day where I would run laps around the house until I felt the fear. I would start in the dining room, run through the kitchen, then my room, down the hall, take a right down the narrow hall, and back to the dining room. No idea why I did this, kids are stupid. The dreams got worse and I started having a new trance-like dream. In this new dream, there was a beam of blue light. The light resembled water, but if you put your hand through it, the light felt solid. It's weird, I know, but that's the only way I can explain it. This dream would always end with the light pinning me to the ground. Now you're going to be unsatisfied with what I am about to say, but that's the end of the story. Things sort of stopped happening once we got a pet cat. No clue if this is significant. Cool cat, though, we named him Hobbs. And it wasn't long before we moved. I have felt the fear only once after. I swear I saw something out of the corner of my eye in a mirror. Then I never felt the fear again, and I will never forget it. If you must know, my father was an assistant pastor for all my life. My mother was going to school to be a nurse. Was it all real or just a kid's wild imagination? I prefer to believe we evolved to sense predators for a reason.
Central Germany, mid-2000s. Walking through the forest, it is about to get dark. See a group of 4 people coming into my direction. They have guns. Otherwise, pretty normal attire except the guy who walks in the front who wears the hat of a Navy uniform. Think they are hunters, even though it is spring and you are not allowed to hunt during that time. Greet them as is usual in rural areas. They all say "good day" at the exact same time, as if they had practiced it all day. After 3 minutes, see yet another group of people. 3 this time, they also have guns. Like the other guys before they say "good day" at the same exact time. See another 2 groups of people on the way. One of 5 and one of 4, same deal as before. They all have guns. Kind of worried at this point, getting dark. Then even more of them start coming towards me. Not even from the direction of the villages, just fucking straight out of the forest, across a field and into the next forest. Two this time want to ask them what the fuck they're going to hunt here. 20 meters away from me, they stop. One of them yells, "It is that way." They take off into the forest like their lives depended on it and take their guns out. Go home confused and slightly scared. Hear gunshots coming from the forest that night. Probably got pranked by a bunch of assholes, but still scared me.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.